that work here. The folks that work here and essential workers especially, we don't have anywhere for them to rent. And we don't have zoning that allows us to have that in anywhere but Hyannis.
Some coming, I see.
I would just say costs. I think
Yeah.
it covers a lot of just costs to maintain existing rentals, the cost to create new, and then cost to a tenant to be able to afford it to live in Barnstable. And for a homeowner to live in Barnstable too. What cost is it to do that?
Cost is growing bigger also.
In some cases, it's also what is around these areas that you're planning on putting, housing, lack of parks, lack of public transportation, safety of, crossing streets. We have a lot of old infrastructure when it comes to our streets. And, I worry about somebody running into a street to play or whatever.
Yeah, so the whole system of what's around the housing and what's there and what's not there.
Yep.
I just wanted, I'm not gonna answer, I tuned into that.
Okay.
For this, but I just wanna say, it was interesting, because when Hyannis, I was Hyannis was born there and all that, and, still there. It was interesting when they first built the housing in the 40s and 50s, the major, starter homes, they used to call them. And, they were smart enough to do exactly what this person's asking about, is putting parks in the neighborhoods. So it creates a neighborhood, number one, it's a place for kids to go and play and everybody to know each other, et cetera. And obviously now with the pandemic, it's very interesting how much that skyrocketed now as a proponent of, or a component of what housing areas should have, which is a lot of green spaces. People are understanding now the effects of nature, exercise, recreation, et cetera, on the mental and emotional stability of a population. So it's interesting to me how the after World War II development kind of had a right as far as the balance goes. And we've become very imbalanced since then due to whatever, scarcity of land, just whatever it is. Not blaming anybody, it's just kind of the way it is. But it is very important going forward, particularly if we're in Hyannis going up and not going out as far as density goes. It's really important to balance that in a planned basis and not just hope for somebody to donate property or something like that. Just a comment to back up what this person was saying next. Not that you need it.
And I think I'd piggyback on what Felicia's talking about with two words, neighborhood. She mentioned that, neighborhood and community. Because you can warehouse people, or you could really have, communities where people care about each other, they care about their community, they care about their neighborhood. There's a network, there's a built-in kind of lifestyle, and people work together. I think that's really a key component.
I think if you look at some of the complexes going up in lowercase, other communities that specifically like composed in the lowercase, they thought of that as well, that the community room, the nice playground, the landscaped area. They're pretty nice looking complexes that I think take that into consideration. I hope we take that into consideration when deciding, our builds have that, take that into consideration versus a high rise with, 300 apartments that leave no consideration for any of that kind of, neighborhood with a playground and a bus stop that's covered and, a space for people to sit together on a bench and talk, and a walking path. Community.
Yeah.
I think fairness and consideration for the people who presently live here and have invested in their homes. Advocacy can sometimes be one-sided and focused on certain things and not necessarily always consider implications that impact others who certainly are interested in quality housing and living in the community, but certainly have a stake in the community itself as citizens and residents.
I'm on the same line. I think about creating village centers that are walkable in the future. And any new development should be built to scale. I think some of the ones you look at Brewster, Wellfleet, they're not 4-story dormitories. They have green space around them. So. But I know that goes back to what.
So kind of
That
the
goes back to the
context.
cost factor.
Yeah, context matters, right?
Right.
Yep.
And I think at this time, we're tearing up our roads to put in sewer. And I know earlier you said that, sewer is like a big part of being able to put affordable housing in. And at this time, it's also, if you're tearing up the road to put in sewer, it's a good time to look if this is a good time to also put in some sidewalks or to change the traffic patterns with being able to cross these roads and allowing people to actually get on their feet and walk, because it's a beautiful place to walk, but you just, you gotta run because nothing will hit you. That's the part that concerns me the most.
All right, how about we take just one or two more? I love that you all have so much energy, but I also, we have a lot to talk about tonight. So, any last thoughts? One or two last thoughts, or are we?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the inventory being used for summer employees, or summer rentals. So a lot of them that used to be for year-round housing have become Airbnb or house seasonal workers. And so they're just using up housing for those year-rounders who can't stay here anymore.
So is your concern for the seasonal workers finding places to stay, or is your
That,
or
yeah,
your
that
okay.
too, and Airbnb, because
and the Airbnb?
we're competing with tourists
Mhm,
and summer workers.
mhm.
That's,
Oh, I see.
that's a lot of competition for a local.
Okay, yeah. Just want to make sure I understand. Okay, so let's move it along. The virtual audience, yes, the three big ones here are the costs related to housing. A lot of the same, some of the same keywords, I would say. There's infrastructure in here, zoning, trying to have things for young families, and wages not keeping up and things like that. But this is now a cloud, but we have all of the phrases captured of what they're saying too. So, oh my gosh, there we go. Okay, so let's get into the needs assessment. So this is really, we're going to start throwing a lot of data at you, but I'll try to go just hit the key points, right? So you don't have to try to read the graphs and things on the slide. I'll try to talk you through it. This is really about trying to understand some of your demographic trends, who lives here, what's happening with the people who live here, economic trends, housing trends, and then translating that into housing needs. And we have the housing needs kind of come first, as there's three really key housing needs or demographics that we'll touch on, and then we have some data to try to talk through why we have highlighted those as housing needs. The first thing to touch on real quick is the subsidized housing inventory. So right now you're at 7.2%. That's using the 2010 numbers. We estimate that you'll be a little bit better off in 2020 with 7.7%, just with the way we think the estimated year-round housing units will be. But we don't know until we get there. It looks like your actual population did go up by quite a bit in 2020. So this is going to be a little unpredictable. We can get into that too. But ultimately what that means is to reach that 10% threshold over a 5-year period, you're looking at creating about 421 subsidized units in that time frame to meet that. Now, whether or not you meet that or not, it's about making incremental progress toward that goal.
Also, to be clear, these don't have to be new developments. So there just needs to be new deed restrictions. So just so you know, it's not building 421.
And is it 80% AMI or lower, correct?
Correct. That's one of the requirements. Yeah, it could be lower than that, but it has to be at least that. Okay, so here's some of the needs. There are 3 key needs, and we're going to talk through 1, 2, 3, some of the data that goes into this. One need that we see is around creating more smaller units, smaller, like 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom type of units. Another need we see, and this isn't going to shock anybody, more year-round rental units, and trying to think through your seasonal workforce and having places that they can go where you aren't competing then with the people who are trying to find housing here year-round. And then also for the demographic of your extremely and very low income affordable, finding places that are going to be affordable to people who have very low incomes too, because they're extremely cost burden, which is another jargon word that we'll define. Okay, so the need for smaller units. Why are we saying we have a need for smaller units? So 85% of your overall housing stock are single family homes. Most of Barnstable's housing stock is that it's a little bit, the multi-unit housing options, which do tend to be smaller units, are it's like delayed. That's interesting.
We have this beautiful slide up with the graphics.
I know, and I'm talking and I'm like, it's not on the screen. It needs to catch up. Catch up. Go ahead. You can do it. Oh, what happened? That was interesting. Oh, I think my internet might be in, well, something's unstable, definitely. Okay, I'm gonna reshare my screen. Technology, point. Is it, do I have to do something here?
So 85% of.
Yeah, sorry, I can, while we're working, I'll let her fix, oh, now I'm connecting even, I don't even know that I was connected, I keep dropping in and out of the thing with my internet. But while we're working on it, yes, most of that is concentrated in IANA. Of your multi-unit type of options. In the rest of the villages, it's 81%, that's single family, but in IANA, it's more like 52%. So there's a big difference between those two villages.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Sure.
You said in Diana, this-
So in IANA, the village of IANA, it's 52% of single family, and the rest of it is it might be 1 unit attached, might be 2 to 4 units, it's something else.
Small multi-family.
Yeah. And in the rest of the villages, it's 81%. Combined, it's 85% of single family, but that includes the 1 unit attached portion.
How do you get?
I know, yeah, it
81%
includes the 81%. There's 4% that's attached
On average.
single unit, so that counts towards the single
Okay.
family. Yep. I know, it's like, okay, making the math work. So what that means then, but then the caveat to that is 7 out of 10 Barnstable households are only 1 or 2 people. So what that means then is you have, and you have a share of older adults that's growing. IANA has a younger population on average. So you can see that, oh, get the slides up. Those sort of, if you go from like 2000 all the way there to the 2040, and you're looking at that dark blue bar getting bigger, that's your older folks, their 60 plus age is going from maybe 20% in 2000 to by 2040, looking more like 40%, 37%. IANA is the bar on the left, they're at like 15%, that's 65 plus, and then, but the whole of Barnstable, it's more like almost 1 out of 4 is 65 plus. So there's a bit of a difference there. And what that translates to is there's also a bedroom and people mismatch. So you have, the vast majority of your population being not the vast majority, like 2/3 being 1 or 2 people. But then you have your single family households tend to be 3 bedrooms or more. So you have a lot of, I would presume that translates to people who are a single person or two families living in houses, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You certainly can live in a house that's larger than the number of people living there, but it also shows that there are not necessarily options for if you want to downsize or if you want to move to a smaller home. And those, if you're on a smaller home with smaller amounts of land, it tends to be more naturally affordable just because it's smaller. And we're talking little A affordable here. So, you know, that might mean you're selling your single family home and moving to a condo or something like that. But anyway, there aren't the same options. So if you think about where you're going to be at in 5-10 years and your kind of housing needs that you might have in 5 or 10 years, what, you know, you want to be able to age in place. Some folks want to stay by age in place. That means they want to stay in their same house, in their same community. But other people, it's more important that they stay in their community, not necessarily the same house, or they have mobility challenges or things come up and they need to shift to a different housing type. But whether or not those housing types actually exist in your community is another question. So I think Alana's got the presentation better. So I'm just gonna advance on my slide. You'll advance here. So that's the bedroom. That's the bedroom slide that I just talked through. So we can move on to the IANS. So the multifamily zoning is limited. It's really mainly in IANS in your broken center sort of boundary area. So that's really where things are concentrated. And that's also where your main like sewer infrastructure is too. So I mean, there are reasons why that is getting concentrated there, but it also means there's less options in the other villages. Okay, so the need for year-round housing. Some points here, your population growth is really uncertain. So if you know, the bar on the left, that is the census. So this is what has actually happened. You've grown a lot, and then in 2000, your population started to decline. But then, as we all know, we had the pandemic and all bets were off, and now your population has gone up. And so now you're actually above your 2000 levels. Now, whether or not the projections have caught up with what's happening on the ground, we don't know. So there's demographic dynamics happening with an older population, people having fewer kids, maybe not being able to find housing that's affordable here, and that's all contributing to the population declining. On the other hand, you have a lot more remote workers and a lot more mobility now in the workforce than we ever have before, and it's a great place to live. And so you have folks, you know, starting to live in maybe their second homes year round and other things like that happening. So long story short is, yeah, we don't know what is happening with your population, but either way, it's a good idea to have more year-round housing units, because either that's going to help people who are moving here continue to live here. One of the reasons why it may go down is because you don't have enough places to live, and if more people are wanting to live here, that's just more demand. So you need more units either way.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to bog you down, but when you talk about year-round housing units, you're talking about people who might have a house that's built for year-round housing, but they also occupy it 12 months a year minus vacation time. You know,
Right.
we're talking about that.
Yeah,
So you're not talking about second homeowner housing.
no, we're not talking about.
Have you looked at second homeowners as a percentage of bedrooms?
I haven't looked at it as a percentage of bedrooms yet. I looked at it more as an overall percentage of the entire housing stock yet, but there are more when we get to that slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
Never mind. Go ahead.
well, we're getting there, but that's a good thought. That's an area where we really want to dig in a little bit more, and so stay tuned on that, because we want to dig into both short-term rentals more and second homes more. But we have a little bit of. We'll show you what the information we have so far.
Can you just elaborate what the MassDOT data that's being bolstered at is? Is that just traffic forecast?
No, it's a population projection that they do, as well as UMass Donahue. And we did actually look at Cape Cod Commission as well, and they have their which isn't reflected on this slide, but we're trying to find you know, as many projections from as many legitimate sources as we can to try to get a sense of where this might go. And theirs is slightly flatter of a decline than what the steep decline they're showing. But my guess is that UMass Donahue and Mass DOT did theirs back in 2018 before the pandemic. And so they're looking at that trend line in from 2000 to 2010 and just sort of thinking, well, it's going to keep going that way. But COVID changed everything. So yeah, the actual literal census numbers is now out. So a lot of uncertainty really for that. Yeah. I'm not even sure, but where my presentation keeps jumping in and out of me joining or not joining the meeting. Okay, so for your housing stock, your housing is 3/4 of it is owner occupied. So you do have some rental, and actual Barnstable, which is the second from the right there, has more rental. Second from the left. Second from the left. Thank you. My other right. Your other right. You have more rental options than a lot of Cape communities. The Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard lists like 20% is kind of anything under 20% considered a rental desert, as you really don't have much options. So you're not a rental desert. But the question is that you have a higher than average rental, but is that enough? Is that really meeting the needs of people who are not able to own a home or don't have enough income to own a home? Rents are up too, but some people don't have enough to make a down payment and so forth. So are there enough choices for renters is a question. All right, so seasonal housing, which we had just touched on. This one, so I was quite surprised with this statistic, and some of you maybe as well. When we looked at so Barnstable subscribes to a proprietary software service that tracks all of your short-term rentals from every platform. And we looked for August of this year, thinking this is like, okay, peak tourist season. We called it for just if it's an active one that's rented something in the last year. How many of those are a percentage of your overall housing stock? And it's 5% are active short-term rentals, which I found surprisingly low. And you probably are thinking the same thing. However, your overall housing stock are 30% are second homes. What I want to do, and 96% of those short-term rentals are renting out the entire home, which probably isn't that surprising. That's probably more money. So because I know there's a lot of focus in town on short-term rentals really taking a lot off of the housing stock. And this makes me go, I wonder if that, because that's a lot lower than what we would suspect. But I want to try to dig into the data a little bit more and come up with trend lines of like what has it been in the past? Is it growing? Look at some other months that we're going to be digging into that data a little bit more for you.
One thing we were able to track, and it seems to be a trend that's going on, that businesses are buying houses for their seasonal workers. Do you track that at all? I know that's going on. Golf courses. I know a golf course has 3 houses that took off for their seasonal. I just wonder if you're tracking that. Other businesses are buying houses.
Yeah, I'm not sure of an easy way to track that.
I wonder.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be something I've heard from a lot of different folks that.
I would love to follow up with you after if you have some. I mean, we'd be happy to call and.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you. I just wondered if you did capture that.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah.
ownership, that's significant.
Just a couple comments, my concerns with some of what you're showing that the figures there. The platform that the county is using is only been used for 1 year. Not even a full year's history, I don't believe. And if you look at the number of short-term rentals registered with the state, that's one set of numbers. If you take a snapshot in time during what this company's looking at, that's another set of numbers. And during COVID, a lot of short-term rental places, because of the cost, the cleaning cost, they decided not to rent. So to take a snapshot in time, and say that's all the short-term rentals you have. I don't think that's a real accurate way to look at it. You have to look at what's registered, not only with the state and what the town is, but there's even more registered with the state. A lot of people don't register with the town because they don't want to pay the fees. So you're really whittling that down to say, you know, here's what this company has captured during this period of time. The other thing is, I know in some of the meetings, while they do look at a lot of places like Airbnb and VRBO, they are not capturing every company out there. There are a lot of companies that they're not capturing. People like Craigslist, I remember the town saying, no, we don't capture that. So I find those numbers suspect to say, well,
Yeah,
we only got this many short-term rentals. Some of our housing experts and people have said, short-term rentals are taking housing stock out of our inventory. To what one of the women said earlier about the Airbnb, again, you know, one of the concerns I have is that when you look at a shortage of anything, whether it be housing or widgets, there's a couple of ways to look at it. You can produce more, which is we'll build our way out of this, which a lot of experts will tell you can't do. But you also look at an efficient use and utilization of your current supply. That goes to short-term rentals. Many towns, places have said, we're gonna put a cap on that, you know? So there's other ways. My only concern is if the focus of this is let's find our way to build our way out of it, let's create more and more and more. Let's also make sure we look at the effective utilization of our existing supply. I remember hearing the former housing director for the town, a quote she said is, we don't have a housing shortage. What we have is a problem with the way that housing is being used. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at all means of addressing this issue, not just trying to build more and more, because I do have concerns what impact that has on the nation of the Cape. As this other woman said, the reason a lot of people built here and moved here and built here. So
so yeah, so this was a stay tuned slide, because I agree with you, I was a bit surprised by that number, and if we did count registered and unregistered ones, whether or not they were registered with the town or not, the software, I believe, captures both. But nonetheless, yeah, we want to look at, try to dig into that a little bit more and try to get a more, you know, if we can find some trends, we'll try to do that, or so at least not just this one data point in time, which is August of 2022. All right. Same with the second homes. That I think would be very interesting to look at over time. Okay, so now we have the need for very low income people. What's considered affordable, as I said, it's if you are spending more than 30% of your annual household income on your housing costs. If you're spending more than that, you're considered to be cost burdened. If you're spending more than half of what you make in a year on your housing costs, then you're considered to be severely cost burdened. In Barnstable, the cost of ownership is up. 2022 has been unpredictable, a little bit up, a little bit down, but in general, you know, up is usually the way it's been going. And to the point where if we look at the next slide, this actually rewinds us back in time a little bit, because the most recent data we had for this was like, well, fiscal year 22, I guess but still, like, so to explain this slide, if your median household income, when the snapshot of time was done, that was about 77,227, which is lower than about the 100,000 we were talking about earlier, which is a little bit more of a recent number. That means you could buy a home that was about $279,000. I mean, there's no way you're going to find that. And then it just gets worse from there, right? So the income you would need to actually afford a median single family price in 2020, which is 2 years ago, things haven't really gotten better, is $132,000 a year. The homes at the time were going on average $479,000. Now, I mean, you know, they're $700,000. I mean, they're way out there. And what that means is that this is now talking that before we were talking about households, now we're talking about just single income earners. So we're talking about a single home health aide person or someone working in wait staff or retail or carpenters, landscapers. these are kind of with the incomes that they're making. Granted, there's a whole set of assumptions on the bottom there, but in general, the point is they're making a fraction, right? They're making a fraction of what they would need to be able to purchase a single family home in Barnstable. And that's folks like this, your teachers and your social workers and your nurses, right? They're such an essential part of your community and keeping your community going and your economy, that they're going to struggle. They're going to be more cost burdened. They're going to be able to, are they even going to be able to find something in Barnstable's question? And this is slightly dated. We go with the most recent data we have available, which is 2021 in this case. Rents are going up too. So we've got, those swooping up. The latest data we have here is 2020. That, if you looked at rent-a-meter or something lately, it's higher than that now, which translates to the lowest income earners can't afford rent. So in this snapshot of time, you're actually not too bad if you're making about 80% AMI. You've got a bit of a more, maybe a family household where you have 2 income earners. You're kind of managing okay. But if you get into the lower incomes, there's just a huge gap for being able to afford rent. And a significant number of people in Barnstable are in those income brackets. So there's almost 40%, so 39% of Barnstable households earn what's considered to be a lower moderate income. So they are in those income brackets. And the village of Hyannis is more likely to be having folks living with those lower incomes in Hyannis. The outer rings are Hyannis. So the lower incomes, so like 27% are making less than $25,000. So then you start getting very, very making some real hard choices in your living costs and your other bills. Barnstable, compared to a lot of other communities in the Cape, does have a higher percentage of families who are below the poverty threshold. And the income does vary greatly by household type. So the line at the top is the area median income. The blue bar on the left is those, if you're living in a family unit, you might have more likely to have 2 incomes coming in then. And so you're right up there with the median family income. If you are the area median income, now we're talking about all of the Cape. If you're the gold bar, you're Barnstable only. So you're somewhere more in the middle. If you're the pale line on the bottom on the left, that means you're not a part of the family. So you might be living with roommates, you might be a single person, and that's like half of the income that family incomes bring in, which, 1 versus 2 income earners usually. On the right, it's owners versus renters. So the owners are at the top, making pretty close to the area median income, above average of the overall Barnstable level income, and then down the pale bar is the renter occupied income. It's about half of what the owners, of people who own their homes, are bringing in annually for income. So those track. Yeah.
I will answer your question in one. Could you just step back for 1 minute and could you clarify how many people are in poverty in the town?
Yes. So in Barnstable, there's about 7% of families living below the poverty level. 7%, 7%, which is higher than, so the comparison communities that we use for Barnstable are Sandwich, Bourne, Mashpee, Falmouth, and Dennis.
And do you have a number of families?
7% of registered. Approximately. I'm sharing the screen, so do you want to just hop onto the workbook really quick? I can't give you that, that would just give us.
Yeah. Can we put a pin in that and
Absolutely.
link back to that? But yeah, we can, why don't we save that for the Q&A at the end? We'll find that exact number for you, because we can look it up. I don't think it's in our notes for the slide.
On this graphic, I do just want to clarify, so a lot of times we talk about this
area median income, and that is what determines sort of those affordability rates, right? So if you're making 80% of the area median income, and that's calculated by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So that's kind of a standard set for your community based on Barnstable and Barnstable County and, sort of the surrounding communities. And it's based on this median household income. That's that gold bar in the section. And what we're really trying to convey here is that if you are not, if you're in what's considered a non-family household, so like Laura was saying, someone who lives by themselves or lives with roommates, or if you're a renter, which is on the right-hand side there, again, that little pink version, you are falling below even just that median number that's being used to calculate these numbers. And so when you have, of course, I know it makes sense, but when you have two income earners in your home, you're more likely to be able to afford that sort of area median income. And when you have one income earner, or perhaps you have opted to rent because that's more affordable for your income bracket, you aren't able to reach, you can't even meet that area median income. You're just that much further below. You're about 50%, where the Department of Housing and Community Development thinks the area can afford. So that's what we really want to convey with this slide.
Just the demographic touch point too for you is so we talk about Black, Indigenous, and people of color as a demographic. The Cape in general, there's probably about, I think it's about 91% identify as white only. In Barnstable, it's about 1/4 of the entire population is now identifying as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And then in Hyannis, that's almost half of people are now in that category. So there's a lot more diversity in Barnstable, and especially in Hyannis, than the rest of the Cape at large. And that's, I think, just about doubled every 10 years or so. So that's a trend we're seeing across Massachusetts and the United States, but it's especially dramatic, I think, in Barnstable. And just a note too, there's 14% of residents born outside of the United States, and English is not the primary language spoken at home for 18%.
Barnstable overall.
Barnstable overall. And my question is lost. Go back here.
So now we want to
Yeah.
just sort of redirect. If you were using that Poll Everywhere software, for those of you who are with us at home, you can definitely type in here again. I mean, back there, all of you are also welcome to do it virtually, but also we just want to kind of chat. I know we just threw a lot of data at you, so right now we just want to kind of gather like what did you already know? What made sense to you? What sounded familiar with what we just kind of threw at you?
Everything.
You felt like you knew pretty much
Yeah,
everything we shared.
there was nothing surprising there.
I don't feel like you're describing my neighborhood at all. I live in Hyannis and I've been there 30 years. I own my home. Across the street, there are 4 people on the mortgage. There are 20 cars in the yard. I'm not positive, but I think they're renting rooms. They're probably not registered. And I'm seeing that through my whole neighborhood where they're running businesses out of a residential area. And another house that just sold for 500,000. There are 4 people on that deed. So if you think you have 4 earners in the house and they're qualifying for $125,000 loan, then it's affordable. The house across the street went for 550,000. They paid 40,000 over asking, but there's probably 4 families living in a 4-bedroom house. So my concern is parking, resources, trash, occupancy,
Yeah.
and devaluation of my property because of what's going on.
So you
It's
have
moving right up West Main Street.
So there's it sounds like overcrowding and people going in
Right.
together on a house because it's so unaffordable
Right.
that that's what they have to do to be able to
Yes,
live, yeah.
but,
But
you
it
know, there's
causes,
also
it also has the
occupancy
flip side,
laws and,
yeah.
you
Overcrowding is
know,
not great.
zoning laws and so I don't feel like, you know, we're describing, she's my neighbor, she lives alone in a 3-bedroom house, she's been there 25 years. You know, yeah, so you've got one person in a 3-bedroom home. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't feel like you're describing what's going on the ground in my neighborhood, is all I would say. I have a lot of landscapers working out of their homes, trucks coming through the neighborhood. I see, like he was saying, you know, the character of the Cape changing. I grew up down here and I've been in my home for 30 years and yeah, the changes are hard to, I mean, I wish they would take care of the stock that they have now. You know, we've been in touch with the town. It's very slow moving. Instead of building more high rises, you know, maybe we could get a handle on what's going on now. Hyannis is really, really changing.
So anything else for folks who are anything? So we have everything's familiar and nothing's familiar. Anyone else in the middle? Any?
I think the data is not accurate. I think it's just delayed.
Right,
Delay.
that's
old.
Varied across.
I think your data, your stats are old.
Mhm.
They're not, you know, and to feed us stats that are, you know, 5 years down the, you know, backwards. That's backwards. It's not forward. I think that to feed us stats that are so backward is unfair. Very unfair. You know, so just, I mean, you know, your stats are old.
Yeah, it is a snapshot in time and things.
Well,
do
you know, a
move on.
snapshot of
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
to me
Mhm.
is the here and now. It's not prehistoric 5 years ago, or you're telling us stuff that of 2010. We've gone through a pandemic, we've gone through, you know, another presidential election, and yet the aspects or the findings that you're showing us are, it's behind us.
Well, most of the data we're showing you is from 2020 on. But yes, we are limited by the most recent data we have available. But what is it on the ground that you're seeing now? This is part of the reason why we have these forums. It's like, this is the here and now. You're living the here and now.
Well, you know, for
So,
instance, I had
yeah.
a friend
Mhm.
who was living in a condo that was sold underneath, you know, and if she's moved in with somebody, otherwise she'd be homeless. She can't find anywhere to live.
Mhm.
She can't find an affordable place, so she's living with her sister in Denver. She can't find an affordable place to live.
Mhm.
You know, yes, I live by myself because my daughter doesn't live with me anymore. And, you know, I've seen the changes that have happened. For instance, that huge monolithic luxury apartments that they're building on, you know, on 28, they have the evergreen or everflow, whatever it is. Up, you know, up line, you know, and then they want to build off the golf course. I mean, what are people doing? How is this being, you know, they changed the zoning so that people could build. I mean, come on. And what are they doing over at Wilkins? That's the stuff that I'd like to know.
271 meters.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I mean, to live at Everlay or Evergay, whatever it is, it's 2,300. Who could afford that?
So what I'm hearing is that there's a housing crisis happening on total unaffordability, but also there's a lot of development happening, but it's not the development that's happening isn't particularly affordable, right? It's like luxury.
Well,
apartments.
it's not only, it's not affordable,
Mhm.
but when you talk about parks
Mhm.
and walkways and, maybe little kettle pond somewhere, like they did over Barnstable, all that crap over there. When you talk about that kind of stuff, Everleigh doesn't have that. Oh, they have a beautiful pool. The house, the place that's going up over by the golf course, that's probably not gonna be there unless you're gonna be a member of the Hyannis, country club. And then the one that there's the big, huge luxury apartments across the street, luxury. They're not gonna have a walkway. They're not gonna have like a little, bathroom. Yeah.
Or are any of those gonna go with the current FMR? Does anybody know what the current FMR is right now, and what it's going to for the town?
500 for it, like that.
Fair market rental, right,
The builder won't disclose that.
I think there's a mismatch of numbers here, and what it comes down to is our area median income is not being represented accurately. And both our fair market rents and our, affordable rents are not, it's all not jiving here. The real affordable rents that we need to support our workforce is probably like 20% AMI, or maybe even lower than that, to actually, someone who works at a service job, to be able to afford. And I brought it up at that last housing committee meeting. I think it'd be great if you guys just reached out to some of our larger employers and get a survey of what their actual salaries are. One of those being the town salaries are all public record. So, look at that. What is the average salary of a town employee, and what can they actually afford to live in our community? Police department, fire department, go through those different employers, and think of the hospital. Even a nurse, I don't think could afford to live alone here.
Yeah, so, I mean, we kind of pointed that out on one of the slides, but you're right, it was, I can't imagine it's gotten any better in the last couple of
Well,
years.
I'm
Yeah.
a nurse. I'm retired though. I'm a nurse. But if I get my social security, yes. But if that's all I had to live on was my social security, I'd be a duck in a dry pond. I mean, thank heavens I have a pension from one of my old jobs, one of my nursing jobs. And I've invested in the 401s, but if I didn't have that, yeah, I'd be a wingless bird. Which is sad.
Of course. So, I think we are bound by what the federal government delivers in terms of annual income projections, right? But we understand that there is a gap there, that there's a shortfall. I think the question is, what is the solution that we can present to shore up that gap? Is it rental subsidy programs? Is it buy down assistance programs? So those are the types of strategies and solutions we want to propose as part of this plan, see if it makes sense, if that's where we need to invest our public dollars to help bridge that gap between people's actual incomes and the cost of living.
We need to get those numbers to know what it is, and then we make a local option, a local affordable unit. I don't know whatever we want to call it. We've got all these labels, all these things, but make a different option. It's like this, we determine, maybe it's a different consulting group, but determines what our actual year-round housing needs are for our workforce. We throw this name workforce around. What is that? Is that someone working at McDonald's and someone, working for DPW? Figure that out and determine, and then the Affordable Housing Trust or someone should be throwing money at that to say, these are what we need the most. We will give a $200,000 grant to create these units in perpetuity. And I think that's what we need to identify the most.
So the data aside, do you feel like we're hitting the right kind of need? So the three housing needs we had were the need for units with like just smaller units, just 1 and 2 bedroom, more options for folks. And the other one was,
If they're fair market rent units, yeah.
so smaller units just in general, affordable and under market rate in general, just in general, smaller units. The second need was year-round rentals and thinking about the seasonal workforce. Sounds like that resonates with folks. The next one was thinking about your extremely and very low income community members who finding things are going to be affordable for them. And those are your people working at your deli counter, right? Your, your nurses that maybe, or town, maybe they're a little more moderate on the town income staff, but they're still, it doesn't matter, like, it's pretty unaffordable, yeah.
You know,
The heart of your.
maybe this is not applicable, but why is it that the town gives so many of these developers, like this, right now, there's 3 different big, huge developments going on. Taking up the land, ruining the environment, blah, blah, blah. How is it that these developers get the contracts to build what they're building? Maybe you don't have the answer, and maybe this isn't the correct form, but I'm just curious. There's Wilkins, there's the one on 28, there's the one over by the golf course. There's all of this stuff going on. Why is that?
Private.
Yeah,
Private owner,
It's
private
just the
developer,
market.
buying the land.
But who gives them the license to develop that?
so it's whatever's
The town
allowed,
does. The
yeah,
town
it's
does.
zoning and what's
And
allowed.
even the town has changed zoning laws.
Mhm.
How can they do that?
It's what gets passed through your town council.
Because the developers asked them to. Those luxury apartments were supposed to be 100% affordable when the development agreement for Everly was created. There was a change in that. And then there was an overlay district there for more affordable, and the developer said it's not feasible to do that. So the town changed the zoning
For,
to let them build less affordable units.
why? How can they do that?
Because the developer said it's not feasible.
Because of
Yeah.
this.
It's the developer's money. They can't afford it.
So just to be accurate, it's a little bit of a distortion. It got changed because they fulfilled their affordable requirements within the development as opposed to putting all those affordable requirements in one separate standalone development.
No, that is accurate.
That's just for the record.
So what you're saying
what
is there,
happened.
maybe have 20 units that are gonna be affordable,
So let's just say
and
they,
then there's gonna be 300 that is.
so let's just say whatever the affordable requirement was, 10%. Originally, when that development was permitted, it was structured in a way that the developer didn't want to integrate those affordable units into the larger development. They wanted to do them on a separate site.
She's talking about Everly.
Everly.
knows.
The change that was made was that when the development was sold, the new developer agreed to integrate those units into the Everly site instead of doing them off site. So just
Where offsite? What is that?
they didn't do them off, they
That's
put the
fine.
affordable units in, so there are something like 23 affordable units in the Everly.
At $1,300 a month, it's that.
Again, and whatever the required. We're talking about.
I just want to clarify some of that also. So Elizabeth is right. Whenever we started, that was supposed to be a 4-stage senior community. Okay, the original regulatory agreement on that. So that you could go with perfect independent living all the way around to skilled level nursing and never have to move. Okay. That regulatory agreement was sold a minimum of 3, maybe 4 times. So this is the 4th developer on that, and they said, we're not gonna do, in every single stage of the selling, they chopped off like the top and the top and the top. They came down to independent living. Okay, there's no other services over there, it's independent senior living. And she's right. The original regulatory agreement said, no, we don't want to build affordable there, we're gonna do it here. But 100% of the units here were gonna be affordable. And it's a lot more than what they incorporated over there. Okay, it was gonna be like 60-something units, 62, 65, 64, something like that, right over here. It was called the multifamily affordable housing district, okay? When these developers came on it, they said, we're not gonna build 100% affordable units, we're gonna do market rate, and we'll incorporate some affordable. But the affordable Everly was supposed to do here, okay, the original Everly owners, never got fulfilled because there was supposed to be 63 units of affordable housing there. And they only did 10% of whatever, I don't know how many units they have over there, do you?
It's 10%, I think it's 23.
Yeah, so the town was minus 40, call it 40 for sake of discussion, affordable unit rentals, okay? the developers didn't want to do it here. So the town threw out the multifamily affordable housing district and just did whatever they did. Okay, made it whatever it is now, for density, let's say. Because the infrastructure was there to support that. So the town's minus 40 units. And in the meantime, they gave the developers tax credit. So they don't have to pay for the next whatever many years on it. It's not, all of that money.
So
All
that's
of that
not
money.
entirely accurate, but I think this is a sidebar, and we should probably give it back to the presenters here.
So I think the last question that you asked us was if there was anything other than the 3 preliminary housing needs. And I'm sure that this fits under, depending on how these considered to be defined and unpacked, but certainly I think how housing for seniors. So you might say, oh, that's covered under either smaller units or very low income, certainly related to, fair market value and cost of living and all of that. But how does that fit in here? We do have a growing population of older folks who want to stay in Barnstable, but who are being required to move to other towns, either on the Cape or elsewhere, because of the lack of affordability and or accommodation in the housing. So could you speak to that? Is there?
Yeah,
is there
yeah, I
something
agree.
to
And those
address that
3,
some way?
the seniors are captured both if they are lower income and, for a smaller unit. But I also think there are other strategies that are necessary or goals that are related that could be specifically to the growing senior population, like things like having more accessible units, like for people with mobility disabilities, whether that is, having more options for multi-generational living, having more options for what's called co-housing. So that might not even be deed restricted, but if you join kind of more of a cooperative living arrangement where the by agreement, all mutual agreement in the that it only goes up a certain percentage each year, but it's not deed restricted, so it net keeps it a little lower. Anyway, there's lots of different models. So I agree that like seniors on the Cape and in Barnstable are a demographic that has needs and service needs too. So helping to coordinate the services that you need sometimes as an older person can be really intimidating and complicated, and having more resources to help facilitate that, and maybe even growing your own local resources around renovations and making it better able to live in age and place, as well as if people aren't staying in their literal home where they've been, more options for folks to be able to move to a different kind of unit. So, yeah.
Laura?
Yeah.
Have you, drilled down in the FHI to see how many of Barnstable affordable units are deed restricted for seniors?
No, not
The
yet.
last time I did
Yeah.
it was over 50.
Yeah. So there's a lot that you are already doing for seniors, but the need is still growing. But we also, we don't want to lose out on also, families too, right? You need both. Yeah.
So a couple observations aimed at making this a better study and a better product. I think it's pretty clear. I'm Ray Sexton. I'm on the town planning board. I'm here to listen because we're either going to talk about affordable housing or we're actually going to do something about it. That's the bottom line. And one part of it is we want to help our brothers and sisters and be socially responsible, but the other part is very hard, cold economic fact. And all of us have been touched with your favorite restaurant, or you can't because it's closed because they don't have enough help, etc. So this is probably one of the 3 top issues on the table. So I think what I hear from the room is that your snapshot is off. You got a broken lens. And I'm a retired intelligence analyst, and that means I got to go back and check my sources because I don't think my sources are good. There's got to be a better way to do that. The second thing that I did not hear, and maybe I just missed it, is that I think what was missing in the presentation tonight, and I've only been here tonight, is what's the demand? What is the demand? What is demand for affordable housing? I mean, and we have a tricky problem here in terms of data, because we have a good chunk of our workforce that does the ditch digging and the dishwashing and working in the and all the jobs that I'm too old to do now, that are undocumented. And so I don't know how much gets collected in there. They are a critical part of our population. I don't know, when you start putting up charts, I really don't know. My first thought is, well, how does that reflect folks that they're not going to come forward? They're afraid to do that because they're afraid they're going to, get in trouble. So I think that's another consideration, and I don't know how you tune for that, but I would suggest that there's got to be a way, because that's a critical part of the workforce.
Yeah, well,
I just ask you to consider that.
I do just want to make the comment again that we are working with the best available published data there is. And that has limitations that any community that's facing a housing production plan effort right now is also dealing with. What we wanted to do with this process was build a very large public outreach component so that anecdotal data could really help fill those gaps. And so that's what we're trying to do with these forums and then reaching out to people. So I think these will be valuable pieces of data that we can incorporate into the final plan to make up for some of the shortfalls with what we're working with.
yeah, and this forum isn't one of the, it's not the only community engagement type of moment here. There's interviews and focus groups and more forums coming up and a public survey, and we can get into some of that. We've had a really good discussion. There's just a few more points that I want to cover, and then we can open it up to some more Q&A, because I know people are really passionate about the topic, and I want to hear all your housing stories and concerns, and make sure we have time for that.
Well, I had just one comment. This is anecdotal facts, but the new development that's just leasing up in Yarmouth Gardens is, I think it's 50 units, 42 to 50, somewhere around there. And they have 640 eligible applicants for that. That tells you what to do.
Yeah. So, and also we know anecdotally, like your wait list for trying to get into, say, a housing authority unit or something like that, it's years and years long. So the demand is huge.
And we do have 2 affordable housing lotteries that are, one is active, one is coming online, and we'll be able to pull from the response to those similar data points such as that to see how great the need is compared to what's available.
How do we make sure those are local needs though? Because it's so easy for someone in Western Massachusetts to put themselves on that list, on that lottery for these units. So how do you make sure that we're only looking at our local needs?
We make a request for local preference every time we can. And there was local preference in the Yarmouth one, so you could look at both pools.
So the only other things I want to touch on, and we don't have to dwell on them because I don't think there's going to be any surprises, but just on some of the constraints and capacity that you have in town. So there are and by constraints, there are also obviously huge benefits. So you have many environmental and historically sensitive areas, and we want to keep those, right? We want to preserve those and balance those with development needs. So yes, they are constrained to the development, and that's not a bad thing because we want to preserve them. But we also kind of recognize that they exist. We also, on the next slide, you're making some progress on wastewater treatment. Right now it's in Hyannis, but as you mentioned, that sewer, there's plans to incrementally expand the sewer capacity, which will open up a little bit more flexibility in terms of where different scale type developments can go. I know that the town is also, so on the next slide, your capacity is really a strength of the town. You have a specific community development program with like a housing and specific housing program within your planning department focused on this issue. Your housing authority unit, the wait list, I think you mentioned, it is extremely long. It's thousands of individuals and families on that wait list. But in addition to your local, so-called local action unit work, so the local efforts to create more affordable housing units, the housing committee is also working on what's called an inclusionary zoning feasibility analysis, or requiring affordable units to be created kind of town-wide, not just in one particular zone or another, trying to make it a little bit more blanket. So we're looking into that. The trust has
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
we do have an
Oh.
inclusionary zoning ordinance in place, and we're looking to strengthen that
okay.
for greater
Sorry, thank you
affordability.
for the clarification. Yeah. I know the trust has, so $2.6 million is a bit in grants that's available, and they're working to partner with developers who are interested in creating affordable housing. Since 2006, you've supported 30 community housing projects, appropriating $8.9 million, or 33% of the total funds. I believe that's community participation funds related. And the Cape Cod Commission is a regional planning agency that focused on this efforts too. So long story short, there's a number of dedicated groups in town trying to think hard about this and come up with some good strategies for you all. And just in a context of the regional context, population may not be shrinking, right? After all, so what do we do about that? You're younger than average, meaning you have an aging population, but Barnstable compared to the rest of the Cape tends to be a bit younger, especially in Hyannis. You have more families, you're more diverse than the rest of the Cape, and there's more poverty, but you're also more similar in income overall. So yes, there's slightly more families in poverty in Barnstable, but in general, you're pretty similar. And you have more rentals than some of the rest of the Cape, but not that much more. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but the more information you would like to see this project addressed, we've been taking some notes. And I've heard some really good feedback on that, but if there's any other thoughts you have on information you'd like to see, and then we can get into some of what we've heard so far from some focus groups and kind of next steps and how you can continue to be engaged in the process. So this is a call for other information you would like to see this project take into consideration because this, it's not a final draft till it's final. That's not till March. So we got time.
I have a consideration, and I emailed Ryan earlier today on this. And my concern is certification.
Mhm.
Our plan has never been certified, our current one. And certification is against a metric of attaining a certain, movement towards your stated goals. So ours was never certified. You, in your professional capacity, I'm assuming you work with other towns on doing their housing production plans. Have you worked with towns that are achieving certification?
Yeah.
Is there something that you could really convey in this plan that would get us on a path to certification? I think that's critical. The gentleman here mentioned we could talk about it all day long, but until you actually move in that direction, or maybe you bring some very critical analysis to Barnstable, and you talked about strategies, what can we leverage to make this actually happen versus another plan that sits for 5 years and never gets
So
certified?
I want to just clarify, there's there's an approved
Oh, I know,
plan.
there's an approved
Yeah,
plan,
but
yes.
certification is all about actual production.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That's,
Yeah.
I'd like to see your critical analysis and maybe lessons learned from these other towns that have achieved it. What are they doing that Barnstable isn't?
Using town-owned land.
Okay, well, that's a great, that's what I'm saying. What is the piece that we're missing that we could leverage to get certification? And that, I'm asking you to be very brutally honest, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, and I think Alana made a really great distinction earlier when she said that it's not necessarily construction of new units, it's new deed restrictions. So
That's
we
what I'm
can
saying,
be,
yes.
we can be looking at strategies that deal with our existing housing stock and putting in place additional restrictions without having to quote, build our way out of it.
Exactly, that's
And
why
we'll look into all of the existing ideas that you have going on for both trying to create and do more, say with your affordable accessory unit program you already have, strengthening that, preserving what's there, growing that. And also, actual creation of new units too.
Can you at a subsequent meeting tell us what these other towns have done?
So
That'd be
that's-
helpful.
Yeah, so there are case studies, I'm sure we can include some of those in the report. And maybe even when we talk about goals and strategies, which will be the next large public forum. If that's helpful, we can certainly try to pull in some
I
different
think it would be.
examples.
I don't know what.
Yeah, examples and keep
Out
things-
of 351 city towns in Massachusetts, only 13 communities
Oh, I know.
have a certified
Yeah, I
plan.
know.
So, I
Right.
mean, that tells you the challenges,
It's a
which
big
are,
challenge, yeah.
right, I mean, and some of that is market forces, right? I mean, it's depending on how you're approaching it. But we do have a lot of existing stock and underutilized properties that could be considered for creation of new units without necessarily.
Yeah, and the brutally honest answer too is like the town that I have in mind that's reached certification. One of the reasons why they've reached certification is because they have such unbridled 40Bs happening in their town, and there's so much production happening that they're reaching those numbers because there's no way to control the development that's occurring. But they reach certification because of it, and then they're able to kind of have a moment to breathe and kind of plan through where they want to be. Yeah.
Just, while you mentioned, accessory dwelling units, because some of the comments made today, the people, my wife and I both, spoke out in favor of accessory dwelling units, but were surprised when the town, we also thought they should go further and add some affordability provisions to address some of these issues. And we're surprised when the town, council voted that down, including one of the current housing members shot down the idea of adding any kind of affordability provisions. Accessory dwelling units need to be market rate, we just need to build them. Just, thinking about things besides just build, back to what I said earlier, effective utilization, how do we do things now with our existing housing stock? If we're gonna have accessory dwelling units, maybe we need to think about those AMI as housing experts. You talk to other people, I'd be curious what the experts say. Do those kind of provisions help make sure that the housing stock, accessory dwelling units meet the needs of the affordability that we're looking to do? Just building more accessory dwelling units with no any kind of income restrictions, that doesn't target the population we're trying to help.
So I have two thoughts on that. One is it's actually extremely unusual, if not completely unheard of, to have affordable accessory dwelling units. You have a very, very unique program in Barnstable, and one that I think you needed special permission to do in the first place. So I think preserving that and growing that is a good thing. But I do think about that program, which could have some special incentives in place for continuing to do that program, is a bit of a different issue than the other overall housing need of thinking about friendly multifamily living situations and supporting your seniors and being able to live in the main house and rent out the small unit or vice versa, and like things that the just general larger population needs for housing needs. And then you have your component who truly needs something that's subsidized, like in a sense, all housing is subsidized, but the deed restricted option. So I think you need both, and you can do both, but you probably need some different strategies for each.
Has any thought been taken to, we have some elementary school, I drive by it all the time, that Marston's Mills Elementary School, and it's got the area for a park, it could possibly have a septic system in place at one point. It's a nice piece of land that could be, and it's a lovely village location with a library and a little market and what have you, and I'm not sure, I think that one goes on into it, there was one in Osterville, and each village would be able to break up some of it, all being focused in Hyannis. And somebody had mentioned town land. I mean, these things are available now, and there's an awful lot of good builders and around here, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why we.
That's an example that's been done a lot, is taking an older school building in particular and converting it into affordable housing.
Yeah, I made a beautiful one out of Simpkins School.
And has any talk been, to be honest with you, I wrote the town manager, I wrote my town representative, I wrote Julia Seer. And I received no response on that question from them. What I can say is that we did host focus groups a little bit earlier on, in this process, a little bit earlier, and I see some really good things around the students, they've been noticing. Our senior elementary school came up in almost every single one of those focus groups. So it's definitely a whole, I thought that.
Yeah, and I will say we are actively starting to develop a master planning process for the Marston's Mills Elementary School. One of the critical factors there is that sewer is not going to be available to that site probably until.
One of the condos Southport, they all have their own individual, septic system.
Right, so that's where we have to think about the balance between housing needs and environmental needs, because the town's currently going through a major wastewater treatment, implementing a major wastewater treatment plan to extend sewer all the way out to the Marston's Mill School to make sure that we aren't adding additional nutrients to our basin estuaries to favor water quality. So this is just one of the things we have to think about, how do we direct new development to places that are going to have that sewer in the future? I think it's one of the critical questions that we're talking about in our local comprehensive plan. But we also know to envision the type of development that both respects the character of the village that Marston's Mills wants to see, as well as meets the community housing needs, is a process that's going to take some time. So even though we know sewer is not going to be there until down the road, we're looking forward to starting those conversations very soon to engage the community in terms of how we can best use that town property.
Yeah, so and on the topic of the focus groups, we did those in August. There were 9 different groups. We engaged about 51 people throughout that process. And they said a lot of the things you all were saying. The housing costs are really high. That there are seasonal workers and young adults and seniors who are most in need. There are wastewater and zoning constraints. And opportunities people pointed out were, besides some of the specific locations that did come up that will incorporate as ideas, public-private partnerships are an opportunity, for example, whether that's working with our actual developers who specialize in affordable housing or Habitat for Humanity, for example, and things like that. Streamlining your development process so that it takes out some of the mystery around what creating affordable housing can be in town, and looking to underutilized properties, whether that's municipal properties or other properties that are privately owned, but maybe, are could be, are under, what's the word? I want to say bankrupt, but they could be taken for taxes and something like that, right? The town may be able to get them on the cheap essentially and repurpose it for affordable housing. Your short-term rentals, that's of course that's a huge issue and something we have to dig into a little bit more and better understand. And there's this NIMBYism, the so-called not in my backyardism, that happens with housing and affordable housing in particular, and there's a stigma around it and legitimate concerns too. So, it all gets kind of mixed in, but that was a concern that was brought up in the focus groups.
Everybody mentioned winter rentals versus, that whole, it's very prevalent down on the Cape.
Yeah.
People that are, have a place to live in the winter during the school year, but then in the summer, they're out of luck.
Yep. Yeah, and wind up camping or RVing or something else, or being with a friend. Yeah. Yep, that did come up.
I just had a quick observation, not a question. Unless they're online, I don't understand the crisis that we're having, and it is a crisis. Why I don't see anybody from the housing committee here, other than you, Ryan, who I assume has it here. I feel like that's a slap in our face that, I'm not seeing anybody unless maybe you're here.
Well, to this point, I do want to acknowledge the 3 town councilors that we have here tonight. Paul Cusack, Gordon Starr, and Paula Schnepp had to leave affordable housing trust number. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so so sorry, Betty, like he was just out of my field of view there. As well as a couple of planning board members, local comprehensive planning committee members. So I'm actually like extremely excited about the turnout.
Anytime we listen, well, this is a great opportunity for me to make a plug to put your name in the joint generation to join the housing committee. We are down to 3 members. I mean, there are alternate members that represent different institutions in town, so we are able to have forums and meet, but we have 3 members, volunteer members. So if you or anyone is passionate about this issue, please reach out to me and I will help you put in an application.
Is there anything specific within the next year that you see that could change the dynamic of what we already have for, you know, a flexible or what are the yeah, or something that's in the process that's being built now, it's something that would give hope to somebody for the next year. Is there any tax incentives? Is there any subsidization that would get more housing now? Well,
I'm gonna punch my local colleague.
closing, all that, you know. I mean,
We are talking about an expanded residential exemption for property owners that do have one of these accessory affordable apartments within their home. That's a very unique program in Barnstable that Laura mentioned. It's created a lot of units, and we'd like to strengthen that. We are seeing some of those units be lost as properties turn over and the new homeowners just don't want to have an affordable tenant. However, if they have a 100% tax exemption, maybe they'll change their mind, right? So we are looking at those types of strategies. We continue to partner with local developers and nonprofit builders on state programs that have incredible resources to create units. There's a Commonwealth Builder program that creates affordable units, but the deed restriction sunsets after 15 years. So property owners that acquire a unit through that program can in the future gain equity in their home, right? It's a temporary deed restriction. So that may not be something we see within the next year, but I think the first program I mentioned and some of the strategies that come out of this.
so how do we move that forward?
The Commonwealth Builder program,
The first one.
the first one,
Accessory dwelling unit.
I will put that on a housing committee agenda to move it forward at our next available meeting.
And just, I mean, right, because there's all kinds of wonderful ideas, you know, but there's, we all know we need housing now.
Yeah.
I think this was a perfect segue in our last few minutes to tell you, just alert you to like what's coming next and how you can continue to engage. So the first thing I want to point out is we have a survey, an online survey. It's live now. You could take a little click with your phone right now before you leave and take it. But it's voluntary. All the responses are anonymous. It's not all that long to take it, and we really appreciate it. We usually have a very good response rate with the surveys, and so. But the more you can do to help get the word out, you know, yeah, go like share with your friends, your neighbors, your adult children. Even, I mean, I don't care. High school kids can take it, you know, like it's really of any age. So I think I would love to get all of your feedback and all of everyone you know's feedback in the housing survey. That will really help us fill in some of the, like you said, some of the, there's really 3 buckets of data that we look at. There's the sort of snapshot in time data that we know has limitations. There's the community data, and you all are a crucial data source for us, and that's another bucket of data. And the community wide and trying to reach some of those other harder to reach folks is also an important part of this process. And then there's, you know, then there's the so-called expertise, I guess, that we lend to it, that we try to come up with some smart, actionable things that you all can do. So coming up next, the survey's live now, we mentioned. The next community forum is going to be November 22nd. I suspect it'll probably be another kind of hybrid style meeting like this one. And that's where we're gonna start to share some of our early thoughts from goals, and strategy. And that's it. Now we can just hang out and answer we'll stay until the last question is answered. So, thank you so much for all of your time and your energy tonight and all of your great feedback. And we'll take your questions. You're free to go or stay or whatever you would like to do. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just have a few ethereal thoughts that are kind of in the big picture here. One of them is that, part of our problem is we've talked about it for a million years from the Cape Cod Commission through the whole Cape about balancing the economy. So to me, what that means is creating opportunities for higher wages and better paying jobs. So that means to me, creating a good, opportunities around the knowledge-based sector versus the service-based sector, because until we do that and provide the wages that people can actually afford to live on, we're going to have this problem in perpetuity, and we don't know what the next technology phase is, after Airbnb stuff, something else is going to come along. It's going to exacerbate it forever if we don't do something in that vein. And I understand that's not your purview, but it certainly affects everybody who lives here. So that's part of our problem. And the second thing is I'd love to see this plan or somebody consider how much you want to challenge what we have here when people were talking about, Kathy was talking about our middle school and other surplus properties, perhaps abandoned or otherwise. I think there's a philosophical difference that I believe exists in town from some of the frustration of people who want to see something happening. And while we say we can't build our way out of things, the town clearly, I think, needs to be more proactive, because we heard about the need. Laura Schufelt told us the need in Yarmouth, and that's people from everywhere find that opportunity, obviously, to live there. And the philosophical difference is right now, my observation says, that doesn't mean it's right, it's just my observation, says that the town is willing to let the developer tell the town what they want to build versus serving the need of the town. So I think it's really important, and we talked about this earlier, here, there, and everywhere. It's really important for the town to be proactive to find the need, which they know, but have it a checklist almost, I think, of a need, and actually be proactive in either acquiring the property and then putting out RFP so that the builder and the developer are building what the town needs versus just saying, oh, you want to do this there? Okay, let's see how we can have it happen. Also, I don't think our 10% inclusionary, we're never going to get anywhere. If you build a 271 unit or whatever it is, 250 unit property, and you're magnanimous in your heart and you're going to put 15% affordable in there. We're not going to get there, because in the meantime, you got how many units of market rate there? Not opposed to market rate, you need market rate too. Everybody's got to make a living, but we're not going to get there. So there needs to be discussion somewhere along the line of either increasing those percentages or being more proactive, et cetera. It's a philosophical argument, and I think the town for a long time, I don't think they intentionally did this. I don't think they're doing it in a nasty way or being vindictive about it, but it's just turned into tail wagging the dog, in my opinion, as far as developer dictating versus the town saying, no, this is what we need. So, and then the town can only maneuver so much in between that. Okay, so that's a challenge, I guess, that we need to, you guys on the housing committee need to figure out if you want to go there or not. I don't blame you if you don't. I'm just saying it's my observation, that's all. I'll be quiet now.
Well, we are going there on the inclusionary front. We have an active feasibility study where we are looking to both diversify and increase the affordability requirements there. So more to come on that within the next 6 months for sure.
Yeah, there's a frustration where people will say, we need housing with any kind. So the bigger the better, whether only 13% of it's affordable or not. The rest is market rate, we're missing middle. So we don't necessarily need, there's certain kinds of housing we need. Not just what any developer proposes.
And it also has to be an environmentally sound Or did you make this point just a few minutes ago? Or we're just digging ourselves into a hole we're gonna find? Like, when there was a population pop, we built all of these elementary schools, and now they're standing empty because we didn't really understand what was going on. We cannot just build housing. I mean, I sympathize with the frustration over it not going quickly. But quick can dig us into a bigger hole. Oh, water.
I wasn't saying quickly about building.
No, we're
I was talking
quickly
about
do
just
something.
building.
It just, we have to really be circumspect that we're not making the water situation worse. And it's moving very fast, faster than we can't build our way out of the water system quickly.
Yeah, well,
No, I'm not being critical of you. I'm sharing your frustration. But quick doesn't, I mean, look at all the empty elementary schools, if you want to think about what quick planning.
I was able to pull up the inclusion things for your earlier
Oh,
question.
good.
I wanted to actually put it on back to back. So earlier we had said about 7% of our school families are living below the poverty threshold. And numerically, that is 834 families below the poverty threshold. Canterbury, Blackberry, Eastern,
That's housed families or both, just population of the population?
just in the population.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You said how many families?
834
And that's in Barnstable.
in Barnstable town.
In Barnstable town.
Are we below the poverty?
Which is about 7% of the total population. Do you have the whole number in there? We don't, unfortunately, they're because of how homeless is that house population, we can't really capture that. We are working though to find local data sources. We also really encourage, if you know of something that you think might help us, a local data source that you're familiar with, we would love to take any ideas. As Ryan has said, we are working with the most up-to-date data. Unfortunately, it is 2 years behind, but that is the most up-to-date data, so.
And one of the options in the survey actually asked if you would be willing to share your housing story. You can say yes, and you can provide your contact information if you want to. And we can follow up because we want to plan to reflect your story, right? We want to know about the businesses are having to provide housing for their workers. We want to know about the friend who had to move in with another friend because they can't find a place to live. We want to know all those things.
What's your question? Is this presentation and future ones, is this posted online?
it will be.
It will be, okay.
Yeah, the Housing and Community Development webpage has a dedicated section for the housing production plan. You can follow it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think
Right
our.
on the homepage, there's the housing plan.
Going.
Barnstable County website has the homeless data available from our point in time.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The Barnstable County website has the information for the homeless point in time count. For Kent County town, yeah. So, and our point in time count is done in February every year, and that data is
Thank you.
Have you guys talked to the Cape Islands Association of Realtors at all, to like get any sort of like, I mean, I think one of the interesting numbers to know is how many of our home sales are creating people in need of housing. That's the phone calls I get all the time. My landlord is selling the house and I can't find a place to go. They potentially have money to spend on rent, but they just can't find a place to go. So I don't know if Brian or anyone in the Cape Islands Association of Realtors can give any sort of data on how many on their monthly sales are causing tenants to be evicted or
email every office. Just ask.
Yeah.
I know my office.
Yeah, I know in terms of also recent data, we often do look at like the Mass Association of Realtors and you can get town by town data and they update it every quarter, I think, and you can get better, like more recent snapshots of actual sales costs and stuff. So yes, we can include some of that more recent snapshots in addition.
If you don't know what percent of those purchases are investors buying them, just to short-term rent versus year-round rent.
Well, not only that, they're buying the smaller units, they're buying the 1 and 2 bedrooms, gutting them, and putting, you know, bigger additions on and.
Yep.
And flipping them, or whatever, I mean, my boss's house just got flipped on Rendezvous Lane in 3 months.
We can look at changes in our rental registration program, but I don't know how much accuracy there is there, but we can certainly. Look at
Rentals are notoriously a little tricky and difficult, but we'll see what we can do with some of those. Again, it's gonna be a snapshot of time, but we can provide a little bit more recent snapshot of time too.
So I think I can give a little bit of input on your question. I'm a residential mortgage lender. So I deal with specifically, I try and focus on locals and homeownership. And I feel, and I know that there's a lot of town council members here, so this is something that I feel like is good to tell you guys, is that dealing with locals trying to purchase, and I've had many people come to me who recently, actually somebody that I'm working with right now, who was displaced because their home was sold. Fortunately, they were able to win a housing lottery, which was absolutely amazing. And I was able to help her with that, with the financing for that. But something that I have really noticed that's been a domino effect within our community is dealing with the existing housing, as a lot of us have mentioned. And one thing is that the condominium developments that we have that are here that are for ownership, in which there are issues with concentrations of investors currently, that because of those investor concentrations, it limits the ability for first-time homebuyers to purchase those homes with FHA loans and with mass housing loans, actually, where I can actually provide down payment assistance to the people that need it to purchase these homes, because as we know, condominiums are much more affordable than single family homes. So I run into this issue a lot, and a lot of the time when I'm talking to people, they are able to purchase these units. I look at the price of these units, I take an application for them, we go through the process, I look at their credit, their amount of down payment, their income, and I can qualify them using an FHA loan to purchase one of these units. And the reason that I moved towards an FHA loan with a lot of these home buyers is because they allow for higher debt to income ratios, because in the current situation that we're in with interest rates and home values, this is their best option for them and what makes me able to do it for them. But because of these investor concentrations, I am not able to, because they're above 50%. And same goes for mass housing, because they also have that 50% rule in with investor concentrations, being able to use these down payment assistance programs. And in addition to that, a lot of what's happening is if we're, I look at a condominium development and say, okay, you have under 50% concentration of investors here. The other issue I run into is mismanagement by the association when it comes to condo documents, budgets, and actual master deed restrictions that I don't think that they're aware that they're actually causing harm to locals and making it so I cannot finance with an FHA loan, because things such as a seasoning clause, where I can see where these condos are trying to limit the amount of renters they're having in their development, but such clauses like this, HUD will not allow us to finance with. So I think there's a lot of issues going on with the condominiums, and I've actually looked at the FHA rejected condominium developments and how many units those actually are individual doors, where if any of these units came to be available, it's upwards of 4,000. Where if any of those 4,000 units became available, I could not use an FHA loan and most likely not use any of the mass housing programs to finance. So from my perspective, which is a little bit different, this is what I see, and I feel maybe for council members, this is something that would be helpful for you guys to maybe look at.
I'd say that Emily was interviewed by the appointments committee last night at the town council, and we're going to recommend that she be appointed to the housing committee.
Great for you. Do you work just on Cape Cod, you say?
Yes, I live in Hyannis, and I mean, I am licensed in Massachusetts, New Hampshire.
So there's 4,000 condominium units on Cape Cod.
So
do not get a structured loan.
So when there is the condominium HUD website where you can actually look up all of these condominium developments that have been reviewed. So these are not only the ones that have been reviewed, because I know there's a ton that have not even been looked at to be approved by FHA and by HUD. So the ones that have been reviewed, I'm kind of a data nerd, so I went through every single development and looked at how many units were in there, and it was upwards of 4,000.
And that is not including, so that is only for projected. That is not including the condominium developments that have failed to submit for recertification. So that's another issue is condo developments that have been approved for FHA financing have just not recertified. So they're falling behind on that. So one thing that I was hoping to kind of tackle on my own was trying to get these associations to recertify.
There's no talent there.
Yes, and I run into a lot of difficulty with these associations when I talk to them about this because they feel that, you know, it shouldn't be that hard for people to save up for 5% down payment on a condo when it's quite an ignorant response as well as they don't understand debt to income ratios. If they have 5%, that's great, but debt to income ratios doesn't matter if it's 5%, 10%, if it's over what the limit is. I'm gonna have to do an FHA loan.
And kind of piggybacking on that, I know I brought it up when we had the discussions earlier on. And I know Megan Moore is a big proponent of this, and I think it's a fantastic for tiny homes. They're, you know, I would consider them little a affordable. Is there any, because she's talking about, you know, when you run into these kind of legislative or higher, you know, federal blockades, is there a legislative path that this plan could help us to attain to get the tiny homes as a viable option? Because building an ADU is frankly incredibly expensive. And tiny homes could be such a, you know, a better solution, a more affordable solution. I just wondered if other communities, again, with that kind of broader look you might have on the legislative path to try to get that.
Yeah, that one, it's complicated. I'm gonna check it's complicated box on tiny homes. You know, there's a lot of, because they're, by their nature, you have to make sure they're gonna meet building code, and a lot of times they don't even meet building code. So that's a hurdle, so that's right, that's a legislative solution. But I've seen more commonly, rather than tiny homes, which I think is a higher hurdle challenge that we can probably point to some ways that it's probably gonna have to be advocacy to have legislation change. Are more about like preserving or creating more cottage cluster kind of scenarios where you have smaller single family homes that are more cottage size, 900,000 square feet kind of things that are a little bit more clustered together. They might share a septic type system. They might share more open space kind of things together, or shared parking type situations that are also then have a component of affordability added in there.
And that's the land use typology that's no stranger to the case, right? Cottage
Right.
communities are part of our history. Well, we have kept you all for, and you have remained for 2 hours. I think our next meeting.